meeting this evening. We are having a conversation on housing. I want to thank everyone for coming out this evening. I want to bring greetings on behalf of the board. My name is Fred Baptiste. I proudly serve as the chair of Brooklyn Community Board 9. And everyone, if you are here for a housing conversation, you are in the right place this evening. I want to begin by saying, first of all, thank you to Mr. Ben Metch.
You got it.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Ben Metch with the Fortune Society for coming and sharing some time this evening to help us understand better what goes into housing and affordable housing specifically. I also want to take this time to also thank Assemblymember Brian Cunningham's office as well for hosting us this evening. And I also did want to make a special mention to Board Member Jolie Cobb, who is really the driver on this one in terms of making the connections and making sure that the board office and I stayed accountable to this to make sure that this conversation happened. Jolie. Well deserved, well deserved. This is a critical conversation. If anyone has been around CB9 for a moment, you know that affordable housing is always one of the top issues in terms of our need statements. So we felt it was very important for us to have this conversation, to increase our knowledge, to get better, to understand what goes into these conversations, and to really kind of focus in terms of what we need to be asking for, go back, be demanding as we go forward in the future with respect to development in this neighborhood. So with that, I am now going to turn over MC duties to Board Member Jolie Cobb. Thank you very much.
Hello, and thank you for that introduction, Fred. Very happy to see everybody, and thank you so much for taking the time today to be here. I hope we're excited to talk about affordable housing, because I am. This is something that I feel like is very important, and we rarely get a perspective of somebody that does community-based affordable developments. We always get it the other way around. We have developers that are for-profit looking to make revenue in our community. So having an alternative perspective, somebody that's looking to build what it looks like and have a relationship with us as a community is so important, because we rarely get this opportunity. So seeing what an exemplar template looks like is, to me, a great way to go about this relationship building and how to advocate for our needs, because our needs matter. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Mr. Benjamin Metch, who serves as the Chief Strategy Officer at the Fortune Society, a nonprofit leader in providing services to individuals returning from incarceration. Benjamin leads Fortune's housing development activities, as well as administering Fortune's contracts and risk management program, and overseeing the design and development of the nonprofit strategic framework. During his time with Fortune, Benjamin has handled complex real estate transactions which have required multiple funding sources and regulatory approvals. Currently, he is overseeing the financing and project development for a range of newly opened and in-development Fortune housing developments, including affordable and supportive housing for people with criminal justice involvement in the Bronx, Harlem, and the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Benjamin is committed to finding innovative ways to develop affordable and supportive housing opportunities for individuals who have been impacted by the criminal legal system. In support of this mission, Benjamin also actively provides technical assistance to other organizations in the area of housing development for individuals with criminal justice histories. So we'll save questions for the end. Please keep them in mind as we go about. And without further ado, here you go, Mr. Metch.
Thank you, Jolie. Can everyone hear me okay? Good. Well, I want to thank you all for having me tonight. I feel like it's always a great opportunity to get out and to be able to speak about affordable housing. I think everyone in this room would agree this city has a huge crisis of an affordability for housing, and we need to take drastic action now to correct this. And I can talk about my view of what City of Yes is and what the program that the mayor has put forward and the city council. But really what I wanted to talk to you about tonight was your role as a community board in shaping the development of affordable and supportive housing in your neighborhood. The Fortune Society, we have opened a number of projects and a number of housing developments across the city. Fundamental to the way we approach this is our relationship with the community board, where the housing is going to be built. You cannot, in my mind, you are doing a disservice if you are not listening to what the community board is telling you about their neighborhood. Because so many times I've seen, in my experience dealing with developers, dealing with other individuals involved in real estate, they feel like they are going to acquire the property and put on it what they want to put on it. And the community is just going to have to accept it. That's not the case here. And in my view, and it's a little bit different. I work for a nonprofit. We're not interested when we develop housing to make a profit. It's against what we do. What our biggest interest, we have two main interests when we look at developing housing as a nonprofit. First, that we are able to create deeply affordable housing for the community that we are going to be working with. And second, that we're creating housing for the individuals that we serve. In our case, as the Fortune Society, we're serving individuals returning from incarceration. So a little bit about the Fortune Society. We are a 57-year-old organization. Our mission is to help individuals returning from incarceration. We see over 13,000 individuals a year as part of our services we provide. Not only do we provide housing, but we provide educational services, employment training, mental health, substance use treatment, full wraparound services to help an individual who is coming back from incarceration. Two things we know about incarceration. One, it's highly traumatic to the individual who goes through it. So they come out usually in a very damaged condition coming back from incarceration. So we try and put as many supportive services as we can for that individual. And fundamental to that is housing. I think we know from the work we do that an individual is less likely to have successful reentry if they're not stably housed. Housing is if you don't know where you're going to sleep at night, if it's not safe, or you're not feeling that your family is protected and it's a safe housing, how are you going to have the energy and the ability to do the other things you need to do in your life to be successfully reenter? Do job training, substance use treatment, mental health treatment, whatever the need is. So about 30 years ago, the Fortune Society made a decision that we were going to invest heavily in the creation of housing for our population. But when we thought about it, it wasn't only our population. We knew we had to do it for the community as well. So our permanent housing has two components to it. It has affordable units, and when we talk about affordable at the Fortune Society, we talk about deeply affordable. So we're talking 30% AMI to 60% AMI. We try and create units that people in the community can really afford, not fake affordability. And we can talk about fake affordability. You see that many times with market rate developers who come in who, in order to do the project, create what they call affordable units, which are in reality not affordable to anyone. But we have a discussion about that later. When we are thinking about creating developments and doing housing, those are the two things at the front of our mind. Or one, what the community needs, and two, the needs of the population we serve. Now, many people, and I will talk about this, and I spend a lot of time what I call myth busting, because many times we go to communities and we're saying we'd like to do housing for the community and for our population of people returning from incarceration, and we get a lot of pushback for it. People feel like, wait, we don't want that in our community. And why do they say they don't want that in the community? It's around myths about individuals with criminal justice history. There is a myth about people with criminal justice history that they make bad employees, or that they make bad tenants, or bad neighbors. This is all completely untrue. And we have the development and the track record and history of developing this housing that shows that it's the exact opposite. That individuals who are formerly incarcerated, who have the opportunity to live in this high quality permanent housing, appreciate it, take care of it. And I would tell you this, we have less incidents in our building than I would put against any other affordable housing in the city. Why is that? Because the people who live in it care about it. And we've seen, unfortunately, at the Fortune Society, we see the same issues around employment. That there's this understanding or an idea that someone, just because they have criminal justice history, will automatically be a bad employee. I would tell you exact opposite. When people, and we know this through the work we do with our participants, when given an opportunity and given the support that they need, they turn out to be excellent employees. People who really care about their jobs and are high-performing individuals. So the problem we face, being honest, at the Fortune Society when we go into neighborhoods is that politicians like to demonize our population. They like to say, we can't have them in our community. And it takes a lot for us to be able to explain to the community why this is such a good investment. Now, I will tell you this, and if any of you want to, we have our 140th Street and Riverside Drive in Manhattan is our transitional and our permanent affordable housing. We've been in the community there over 20 years. So I could tell you that not only have we been successful in creating this housing, but we have become incredibly good members of the community. Community Board 9, Community Board 11, I believe it's Saturday, or is it 9? They meet in our building. So the Community Board actually meets in our space. We are constantly doing food drives. We have a garden on the top of our building. We very much build environmentally friendly buildings. That is hugely important to us. And I'll talk to you about a project we're very proud of. We're taking a building on 97th Street between Riverside and Broadway. It was an old SRO which we purchased during COVID, and we are completely electrifying that building. We've taken out the boiler, we've taken out all of the things that cause pollution, and we're electrifying those units. We're going to be able to create a total of 84 units in that building, a number for the community and a number for the people who are participants and are part of our programs at the Fortune Society. So this is a totally different view, and we're not the only nonprofit developer out there. There are lots of other agencies that do this. We want more agencies to do this. I'm part of a working group here in New York City to encourage other nonprofits to get into the development of this housing. Also, faith-based organizations. We have done 2 partnerships. Well, one partnership we've completed, and another partnership we're just starting with 2 churches about taking the properties they have and allowing, one, refurbishing the sanctuaries that the churches have, and in addition to that, creating affordable and supportive housing around it. Now, it has a number of benefits. One, for the congregation, that allows us to modernize and really create the church sanctuary that they want. Secondly, it allows the church and the nonprofit developer to participate financially in the project. The church, while we cannot have profit in a nonprofit development, you can create what are called developer fees, which would enhance. We at Fortune Society use those monies that we create, those developer fees, to support our programs and reinvest in our communities. The churches are able to use that as operating dollars to help the church, especially churches that unfortunately have seen shrinkage in their congregations. And we've had that, but it allows the church to continue, and it has a funding stream that allows them to continue their program. So I really see a huge future around these faith-based projects, working with other nonprofits and developers, and I'm a big believer in it. The one we developed in the Bronx, which is at 1080 Washington, is for individuals 55 and older, both in the community and both who have had incarceration history. We have found that this housing is hugely needed, and I think we were talking before tonight here that the elderly are extremely vulnerable to housing instability. Number one, most elderly are on fixed incomes, maybe surviving a lot on government benefits. We know government benefits do not keep up with the cost of inflation. We know that housing costs are definitely impacted by inflation. So you've created a situation where this portion of the community finds it very hard to afford their housing. And it becomes, many instances that we've seen, a choice between a person's housing and their medication. No person should have to make a choice between whether they can afford to live somewhere and take the medication they need. And so it is, I think in this area that faith-based organizations and nonprofit developers can really do good work to create housing for individuals. And also we want people, if there are the medical support services there, that people don't have to go into a nursing home. We know from a fact that people who are able to stay in their own homes with supportive services fare far better than those individuals who are unfortunately forced into nursing homes. And I don't want to even discuss what happened in COVID in nursing homes and how that is an atrocity that happened in this state about the deaths that should never have occurred in those nursing homes. So we are of the belief that if we can create the housing that people can stay in their homes with support, they're going to do far better than having to be pushed into some sort of institutionalized living arrangement. Long and short of it, this is, and I think what we're here tonight to discuss is your unique role as a community board in shaping your housing. I know it seems like in many instances that the community board is the last group in, that it's already been decided in the city that this is what's going to happen. The developer has already gone through the planning commission or gone through the different bureaucratic things, and you're just supposed to be the rubber stamp at the end to approve this. And to me, that is not what the community boards were designed for. And you're here to be the voice of the community about what you want to see in the housing development that's done. And it's a voice that needs to be listened to. I will tell you this, at the Fortune Society, we listen to it. Before we even think about designing a building and a property in a community, we meet with this community board first. We meet with all the stakeholders we can in the community. We want to understand what the community wants in a building and what it doesn't want in a building, and what it needs in terms of benefit for the community. And you as the community board are the voice of that, and it needs to be heard. We listen to it, and I will tell you, as we'll go through this project here, this was all shaped by our relationship with the community board. And Community Board 11 had a big say in how we created this building. And I will tell you this, so you know how much of a say we had. By the time we were done, because we had to go through ULURP for this building, and we had unanimous community board support for this project. And for an agency, and I will tell you that works with our population, very rare that that occurs. It only occurs because we have open dialogue with the members of the community at all times. So, and I will tell you this, even after we build our buildings, we have a representative from our organization at every community board meeting, so that if there's an issue with our building, we're hearing it. If we see an issue in the community, we're expressing it because we feel as though we are members of the community now. And we're here, we have an investment in the community, and we want the community to thrive around us. So that is kind of a different view of housing development that unfortunately many market rate developers, they're not thinking that way. So, but we're thinking about our long-term relationship with the community we're in. We view housing as a generational force of change. So meaning that if we keep the housing, our buildings up, and they are kept, in good repair and in great shape, that it will serve not only the generation that we're starting with, it will be generations to come will be affected by this housing. It's funny, we're at year 15 on our building in Harlem right now, and we were just looking at it. 90% of our original tenants are still there. And the 10% we lost, unfortunately, some were due to, unfortunately, death, but not because they wanted to leave. They all had an investment in this building. We've had children graduate high school and go to college. We've had new children brought into the building. We've had huge life cycle events that have occurred to our building And what we feel and what we know is that this building has taken on a life of its own in such a positive way. And that's what we're so proud of, is that, and that's why we do this. You know, for a nonprofit, this is a risky deal. You know, we're taking on a huge amount of debt to build a building. This building here, $53 million it cost us to build. And for a nonprofit, that's a lot of money. Maybe not for for-profit developers, but we had to go borrow this money and get the tax credits and do all the things to be able to put this together. But our belief is so deeply rooted in this, is that we're willing to take those risks. And we know at the end of the day that this is a huge investment. And I know for me, when future fortune 20, 30 years down the road, and I would be long gone, unfortunately, at that point, but I know that this will have created continuous housing for the community and for the people who we serve. And that's, to me, affordable housing at its core, is that it's aligned with a mission to better the community and to better people's lives. And that's why I hope and I preach to nonprofits. I'm going to a conference in Chicago in 3 weeks to talk to more nonprofits, to hopefully across this country to get into this field and to do this work. And I think that if we're able to do that, we will really enhance this and change the reputation that this industry has as well. And because there's so many positive things to this house when it's built right and done right.
Are there any sites or any areas that you're thinking about?
I have to tell you, we hadn't thought about this area. We have some transitional housing in Brooklyn. I would love to come here. And if we found the right building, which made economic sense, because unfortunately, you still have to, in order to make these buildings work, for a nonprofit, it has to I hate to use these terms, but pencil out, meaning that there's enough cash flow from the building so that it can operate and that we can maintain it properly. But, you know, we are very creative in finding funding. That's one thing we do. And we're out, we got foundations that support us because they understand the value of this housing. And we're able to, every building, I liken it to a puzzle. You have to understand the neighborhood, what the neighborhood wants and needs, figure out, does it meet with the needs for your population in terms of the people we serve? One thing I will tell you that, and you don't think about it very much, but for us, transportation is a big issue. Where's the building located? We were offered some sites in the Bronx that are very far away from subway access, and the bus access wasn't very good either. So our people who live there would have a hard time getting to work. So we have to think about how do we build in an area that has strong transportation and a strong community. I will tell you, and this is an unfortunate situation we're in right now. We have a project up in the Bronx that we are working on called Just Home. It will be a repurposing of the nurses' dormitory on the Jacobi Hospital campus. They've had a nurses' dormitory there for years, and they've had some things in it, but they decided at a certain point, Health and Hospitals, that they wanted to create permanent, affordable and supportive housing on that campus. So they came to us, and we got through the process of getting the ground lease from Health and Hospitals Corporation. So, but the next step is you have to go to the community, and ultimately the city council has to approve the project. The amount of pushback we received from the community from that project, I have not, in all the years I've done this, I have never seen anything like it. And these are for individuals who are going to be living in this building who have chronic health problems. So highly unlikely they're actually going to be even able to get out of the building much, because a lot of them are coming off of Rikers with really severe diabetes, just lots of different health issues. And the reason why we are building it on this campus is so that they have direct access to health care from the Jacoby Hospital staff. This is one of the most unique projects that will ever be built. And one of the biggest issues about people, and we see it in the state system and in the local system, why they can't get out of jail is because they have these health conditions. And they can't get out of prison because the state prison doesn't want to release them into the shelter system. When you have these chronic health conditions, I think we all know what the result would be if you ended up in the shelter system. It's not going to be good. So we designed this building to meet that need. And not only was it going to have housing for individuals who have incarceration, but this is also for housing for individuals in the community who have these chronic health needs as well.
Okay.
So it was not, and understand, I think one thing about support of affordable housing, let me say this. There's a rule, HPD, which is the city's housing preservation and development arm, that our housing is not 100% supported. There always has to be a community element. So normally it's 60-40, meaning 60% for the community, 40% supported. Sometimes, if the need is really great in the supportive side, it can be 70% supportive, 30% community. But that, it all depends on the project. But if you have, let's say, the 60%, 40%, then you really need to understand for that 60% what the community needs. And for us, it is financially making the building operate at a deeply affordable rate. There are different, if you look at, and I'll throw out all these acronyms, but I tried to give you my acronym dictionary there, so hopefully it can help you. But AMI is the area median income. So that's what they play with when they come to you to do a housing development. Like they will say, well, we're doing it affordable, but most of their units are say 60 to 80% AMI or 80% above AMI. That's not affordable. That is at the top end of what the community, of what people in the community are making. Deeply affordable for us is 30% AMI to 60%. And that's where we've come up with the funding to be able to price our units at that rate so that every person in the community could have access to it. But that takes, most developers unfortunately don't do that. So we end up in a situation, so what I try and do, and we would definitely be interested if you know of properties here in this area that would be good candidates for redevelopment and repurposing and have good bones, but maybe have just been neglected for a period of time. Because we're very good about going in and taking a building that has strong bones, but has some issues with it, and rehabbing that building into something that you can be very proud of. And we also do new construction as well. So we have one building where we just started with a blank piece of land and we're building on it. And we're actually about to top off on that building, which is going to be 15 stories in June. So I would tell you this, invite any of you, if you'd like to travel into Manhattan, our buildings in Harlem, we can show you what good development looks like. And we can take you on a tour of our buildings anytime. We do this for the community. One of our proof of concept is, and if we're going into a community, we invite the community board that we're talking to come and spend the day with us. And we show you what our building looks like. We show you how we keep it up, how we maintain it, and meet the people who live there. And we are very comfortable allowing anyone into that building to walk around because we know what we've done. And that is if you can have that relationship with a developer as a community board and know that that developer is being honest with you, and the other thing I would say is this, when we deal with community boards, we're honest about what we can do and what we can't do, and what our limits are and what our abilities are. But the thing that I think if you ask the community boards we're in front of all the time is that we listen and that we care. And we try and find a way to work it out with the community board that's satisfactory to both of us. that will work for both of them. But you don't want to create a building that doesn't work and that fails. And we've seen many times affordable housing buildings that were not planned correctly, and they didn't understand the economics of it, and all of a sudden they fall into disrepair because there's not enough money to keep them up. And that just becomes a disaster. Then it becomes a building that no one wants to live in, or that the people living in it are living in a bad situation. So, you're hearing my whole spiel about all of this, but I will tell you, this is, to me, in my lifetime and jobs I've had, and I've had many different jobs, this is the most worthwhile job I've ever had. And I wake up every morning thinking about how do I get this housing built for people who need it. And there is no greater mission than that. And in this city, which is suffering from the worst crisis of affordability that we've ever seen, and it is no doubt, and I know that the Assemblyman and that the legislature, they know this, and the council knows this. And I think one of the ways to correcting it is having more nonprofits involved in this development process and having them do this, because that will ensure affordability. We sign on in all of our deals that our buildings will be affordable in perpetuity. We are telling you that there is no way our building will ever be transformed into market rate building, not as long as our organization is alive and kicking. And we make that commitment to our funders, we make it to the people who are, to the community boards, and that is, and we sign the documents. When we close on our financing, because there's financing that comes from the city, we pledge that at least for 30 years that this building will be affordable. And I'm telling you, our view of it is, this is forever for us, as long as we can stay in business and do this.
Vital Brooklyn.
Yes, we applied for it, but we didn't get it.
Okay, that's what because we have so
Yes,
much that they can't.
we were one of the groups in, and we were in the running for it. We got to the final part of it, and we weren't chosen, which was disappointing, because we really wanted to come to Brooklyn through that program. And, I'm not even sure who the other ones who got it, but we were not chosen as one that, we were in a joint venture with another developer and another nonprofit. And unfortunately, we got close, we didn't get it. But it was very disappointing, because I think there was such promise for that area and for that project. Unfortunately, I really not kept up with it because we didn't get it, so I had to turn to our other projects and things that were going on. So I don't know how it's actually evolved into what it's doing, but
Because I like your approach, and that's part of the concern. Cheryl lives in that area, and the impact that some of those developments will have on the rest of the community is very concerning to the people that live there now.
I hate to mention the one word that always concerns me about it, and it's gentrification that comes about from when you high concentration of market rate buildings and areas that come in, it has like an effect that goes out. And you experiencing it, and you know what happens. It just makes the rest of the community, because the other developers start to come in and buy up the buildings. They start to buy up the open land and those things. And then all of a sudden you see the ability to live in that community, it becomes impossible. And to me, that is the worst outcome you can have from affordable housing or from any type of housing development. Because in my mind, it needs to be respectful of the community and not create those situations. And I'm sure you're seeing it. And we're seeing it actually in the East Harlem area where we're going, because there's the extension of the subway up to 125th. And we were just watching the real estate activity in the area, and I saw all the developers start to buy everything up. The minute they were thinking that that was going to go through, and we know what's going to happen.
That's what was your proposal for?
It was supportive and affordable housing. We were not in a market rate deal. Ours was completely affordable, supportive project.
No, but what were you proposing? Were you trying for the whole?
Oh, no, we had a piece of, no,
So
we
you
were.
just wanted to put one building?
Yeah, we were running for one part of it. We didn't get, not for the whole thing.
How many units and how many floors?
I don't remember, let me do this, so I don't misspeak, I would pull the proposal out again, and I could tell you what it was, I have it in my files. But we thought it was a really good proposal. I have to tell you, when we turned that in, I was very optimistic that we could do something there. And we felt it was very disappointing at the end, we didn't get it. But on the other hand, when one door closes, another door opens, so we've had other projects that we've been able to get, which we may not have been able to do if we were heavily invested into, that was a big project. That may have taken a lot of our resources and our ability to do it. So now we've been able to do other housing that we might not have been able to do if we had gotten that project.
Can I ask, what was the stopping factor in the application being turned down?
I don't think, I don't remember, because I don't know if we ever saw the final, normally when you apply for things, you get back feedback on why maybe your project is deficient.
Right.
And it was a while ago, so I do not know what came back on those sheets. We just know that we didn't get it.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just, I would have to go look and see what was the factor. But, you know, it might have been that other developers, they felt were more capitalized, had better funding sources, and at that time, we had had less experience when we applied. Now, we have far more experience in the field. Maybe that's what didn't do it for us.
And could you talk about the site identification and selection process? You mentioned it, I guess it probably works a bunch of different ways for the
Yeah,
publicly available sites that the city comes to you for, they're
Yeah.
privately owned sites, they're religiously affiliated sites, all those sorts of things. How do you scan the market and identify sites?
I actually spend a lot of time doing that. And part of what my role is, we have a construction team inside our agency. They really handle the actual management once we go into construction of a project, because they would never let me near that, because I have no idea how you build a building, like really like nails, hammers, equipment, things like that. But I do understand how you finance and how you go through the zoning process and how you go through all this. So site selection is hugely important, and there's so many, we could have a 3-hour discussion about what makes a site appropriate for development. Number one, there are these programs that the city has. There's an open RFP that we're a part of, so that if they have vacant land that they want to turn into housing, they will look at the people who have applied in the RFP to see if you can get it. That project, which went off the screen there, was one that was given to us by RFP. So essentially, the land cost us $3. That was the consideration we paid for the land. Now, when you're in the RFP and you are making the commitment to affordable housing at that point, that you do not get that land if it's going to be market rate. So you have to make it's a promise, and it's a condition of the land gets transferred at the very end. So it doesn't come at the beginning. So what you get is initially a letter from the city saying, we want to give you this piece of land, but you have X amount of steps you have to go through. One of the biggest steps is the community board. You have an advisory role in that situation, because a transfer of city land to us, a nonprofit, or to any organization, requires ULURP, which is the Uniform Land, whatever thing, I have it on the sheet there.
Uniform Rights.
So ULURP requires a bunch of different steps in order to get approved. One of the major steps is going in front of the community board. And you have what's an advisory role, but in our experience, if we had not gotten the community board 11 support of this, we would not have gotten the project. It would have ended right there. And I know that because I also talked to the city council member, I talked to all the people who would have a say in this, and they told us, if the community board's not supporting it, we're not supporting it. So that was in that project.
So the follow-up question is, from start to finish, since you're in the development business, what's the average length of time it takes to put a project like this?
All right, this project took 4.5 years to get from that letter to breaking ground,
Wow.
okay? And but wait, so I will say this, there were some intervening factors which I would say caused it. COVID was a problem for us,
Okay.
because everything in the city went remote.
Yeah.
So we had to work through, everything was, there were no people. Like you normally, when you're dealing with the Department of Buildings, you could go into the Department of Building and meet with someone and say, all right, how do we fix the problem you have with our design, let's say, okay? There was nobody. We literally had to go through, and this was ULURP done remotely. And that was wrangling cats, trying to get this thing to get through. So I would say your normal experience, to answer your question, is 3 years.
Okay.
It's about 3 years to get through, 3.5,
To breaking ground,
to break the ground from conception.
and then typically a year and a half to 2 years.
Yeah, we're talking, our normal construction on this project is about 2 years. If it's a rehab project, more like 16, 18 months. If it's, depends on the gut rehab, if you're tearing apart the whole inside of the building. It depends on those things. And also, I would say here in New York.
These are not cookie cutter projects.
No, they're not. We start design with a blank slate. This is how we start. And other developers I can't speak for. We start with a blank slate. We understand what, first things to understand based on the zoning requirements, how much can you actually build on that? Let's say you're doing a new building. What you could actually put on that piece of land. So we go to the architect first and say, if you're looking at this right now, based on what the zoning is, what could we put on it? In our building here, the one, we had to go for a variance because it was not, what it was zoned for would not have been financially doable. We need to be able to go higher and create a little more community facility space in the building to make it work. So we had to go, our ULURP was not only the transfer, it was also asking for a change in the zoning on the property.
So I do have one more question.
Sure.
You run into sort of fair share issues with community boards, where a community board is
Yeah.
saying, we already have enough.
Yes,
We
and,
don't-
and we do run into that. So, and I would be honest with you, I think there are community parts of this city that need to do its share. And they put up huge obstacles to having affordable and supportive housing put in their neighborhoods. And it's not right that it's only concentrated, and we see this, we do work in the Bronx, and in the areas that we are that have high concentration of affordable and supportive housing. And it's not right that, and we run into that all the time, and we also run into the NIMBY movement, not in my backyard. And that is a constant theme. But the way we talk about it and the way we approach it is being transparent about who we are, what we do, and willing, and we listen. We're not just gonna say, we know how to do this, we're right, you have to accept the way we wanna do it. That is, one, an awful way to establish a relationship with the community. But two, it's not respectful. And the one thing and this is just us, we have a lot of respect for the places we go. And we want to be in the community, and a key element to our development is that we feel we're community members. We're now with you in the community. So we'll be at your community board meetings. We will be there to, if we're coming up short and you're telling us we're coming up short, we're going to listen and we're going to do better to correct the problem. We're not perfect, we know that. But we also know that we need to listen and we need to understand what the community wants. And if we had the opportunity to come here, the first thing we would do is come to you and say, there's this building down the street, we like it, we think it has potential for what we want, we could make it into affordable supportive housing. But before we even put $1 or 1 ounce into designing whatever it is, we would ask you, what do you want to see there? What would be the thing that this community would need and want from us? So that's the discussion you should expect as a community board from your developers. I know they come here late in it, but you have to say to them, hold on a second. You're coming to our community. You are coming here. You don't live here. You're not residents here. You need to know what this community is all about, and they need to be educated on it. And it's a two-way street, and they need to understand that. So, and if they're not, shame on them.
Yeah, that's not how it's working out.
And I'm sure it's not, because
Board of Voters.
I'm sure it's not, and because I've seen it. I have friends on community boards across the city, so I talk to them all the time. And the frustration in their voice about how they're treated or how it's almost like a done deal when it gets to them.
Yeah.
And they feel like, what are we doing here?
Yep.
Why do you even need us if this is what we're being told by City Hall or by whoever, this has to be done? So, I understand their feelings about that.
Do community boards?
Wait, he's been
Hold on,
asking.
we have a question here. One second.
His hand has been
I
up
feel like
for the
it's-
longest as well. I've
yeah,
been
you
waiting
can-
for him to go. So
Okay.
they know
Go
that
ahead,
bro.
sir.
Yeah, do, community boards typically keep a repository of projects that they have approved and developers
They should.
associated with those?
They should keep it, and I know Community Board 11 does because I'm in meeting with them. They had a history, and part of the discussion we had was the developments that are in their area. And when we first designed this building, we sat down with them and they said, this is what we don't want. They were very clear. One of the things they didn't like in that area, there were a number of drug treatment programs already in that corridor of where we were looking to build. And we knew a number of them already. So the first thing they said to us is that we have enough of that here. That we would not expect you in your community space to be doing that. And we were very respectful. So instead, what we talked to them about, they said what we would want is more employment training services, workforce development type things. So that's what we are putting into this building. We have workforce development. We do it for our own population, and we're going to do it for the community. And part of it is, this is very interesting. We're in line to get a large part of the subway expansion. One of the big contractors is going to be working with our organization to provide opportunities for individuals who have criminal justice history to be working on the subway expansion. What we asked the same contractor was, we wanted those opportunities for the people in the community that we are going to be moving into, which is right near there. And could we not only have those opportunities for our population, but how can we leverage that for the community as the subway expansion comes up there and creating good quality jobs for the community members. So, and we are not only thinking about what we do in terms of our population, we're thinking about how we can enhance opportunities for the community as well. And we're always looking out for that because if the community is thriving, we're thriving in there. And we know that we're connected to each other. So, but I would say yes, as a community board, you should keep track of all of the projects that come through here, because you never know, like, the future community board, say you have a really bad experience with one, right? And you note that in your records, like, all right, so it got through, whatever, it was just awful. 5, 10 years later, you have a different members of the community board, and this same group's coming through here, you already know, we have an issue here, and you're ready for it, because you've seen it before, and then you can hold that person to, if they've changed how they operate, or not. So you should keep a record of everything, and it's also good for understanding the makeup of what's happening in the community, and keeping track of what developments are happening.
And why the minutes are so
The
important.
minutes are hugely important, and those records are for the future as well, because,
But what we have found, and you probably know it, is just to answer your question, is not so much the title, because the companies change their name.
oh, yeah,
all the
they're really good about
Even
that.
within the same project that we were fighting, the developer kept changing their name.
They change the LLC.
So that's like knowing who the players were, so we have to get to like underneath
Yes.
and know, what's the name of that project manager?
And that's what, yes.
So it's like digging under the covers, not just that title.
The beauty of the internet, I will say, is this. You can find out, like, if you want to know, for us, who we are, all of our people are listed on our website. Every person involved in our organization who's on a leadership role, their names are there. If you look at us, all of our entities, everything, we are transparent. You know exactly who we are, who's involved. You should demand that from the developers that come. Who are the people, principals involved? Who are the investors? Who are in these projects? Because that'll tell you something as well. I know the banks we work with are highly reputable. They're invested in the communities and I know the investors we work with when we do tax credit deals. We pick investors who have a similar mission that we have, that we are developing quality, deeply affordable housing. And not every developer does that, not every bank does that, not every, and we can get into the machinations of how you do these affordable deals, especially using tax credits that are given out by the state. That's a whole another 2 hours we can talk about how you put those together and then the people involved with them. Because there are good players in the tax credit field and there are bad players. And there are people that are gonna be a problem for, long-term affordability in these projects. We had a case, it was an unfortunate situation where a investor was trying to wrestle away a building from a nonprofit because the area where that building was built became so rich and that they would make so much money converting that, and they ended up in court over this, and it was ugly. And so when we shop around to investors and to people, we are very clear in the documentation that we sign that they are committed to affordability and that they are not going to cause us a problem at year 15 when the tax credit investor backs out and say, no, we're not going to sell it to the nonprofit and keep it affordable. We want to pull it back and make it market rate. And so there's an underbelly to this whole, unfortunately, industry, and you have to be very careful about it. And it's an unfortunate thing.
So earlier you said something about some organizations doing developing not the right way.
Yeah.
What are some of those examples of developing the wrong way?
Well, meaning that they come in and make a whole bunch of promises about what this building's gonna be, what it's gonna do, and when the building gets finished, it's not that. They change it, they make changes, the things that they say they're gonna do, they don't do. They'll come back and say, we'll make certain investments in the community,
You don't.
then they don't.
Is there a way to ensure that those
Well,
promises?
The non-for-profits.
that's it, that's why it's the issue here.
Yeah.
We're willing, and this is the difference.
Yeah.
We're willing to put it on the line and say, we are committed to this, this is what we are committed to. And we'll put it in this thing, when we handed this out, this is exactly what we did. And we did not deviate, this is what we're building, it's exactly what the community board expected, is what's being built. But that's us, and that's who we are. And I would be embarrassed, I would be ashamed if that's what we did. Because we feel like we have an obligation to the community that we're working with to be honest and to build what we agreed upon what we're building. Now, if we get in there and say something, there was an environmental thing or something happens that we couldn't tell before we got in there, we come to the community board and say we have to make some changes, but this is because, you can only tell until you start digging in the hole, you don't know what's actually there. And we found some funky things in this hole, but it was, that's what, you don't know that. And unfortunately, but that didn't change what we were building. So it's the same thing. We were able to, handle the environmental issues that came up. We did the cleanup that was necessary so that that it's a very safe building. But unfortunately, there was stuff in the dirt that we had to get it out of there. So it was, unfortunate, but that's the building in New York City. Unfortunately.
If a person found a location around here that could be developed, who are the 5 people on their team that they would need? Like, if I found a location, who do I go get to help me?
What you have to figure out for us is who owns the property now, right? If it could be anybody, you don't know whoever. And you can go on, there's a database in the city, they'll give you ownership of, you can search by parcel, you can search by street address, there's a bunch of ways to search it, and it'll tell you. Now, as you said before, it may show up as 1455 LLC. Who is that? Because you don't know who that is. So it takes a little more digging to figure out who owns sometimes beneath those LLCs that are holding the property.
That's what I wanted to tell the young man back there, and the Attorney General has a real estate site that tells you all the LLCs and the changes and when and where. So If anyone wants to dig, they can also go, I have to find out the website.
Right, and then every LLC is required to file articles of organization, meaning who, you have to list on there who your principals are. But they vary, so this is, you have to look through the databases and find it, but you could end up figuring out who owns these properties. But that's the first part on that one. And then the second part is, we're talking about site development, and you have to look at what it's presently zoned for. What is there right now? If there's an existing building, what are the permitted uses for that building? You know, we have issues where if it's commercial, is it an office space? Is it right now residential? Is it, what kind of residential is it zoned for? What can you do there? Another question you might ask also, what are the air rates? Meaning, how high can you go up and build? Say there's a building there now. Maybe it's more advantageous than keeping that building or building on top of that building or adding on top of it or looking at all the different possibilities of what you can do with the building. So those are things it's just basic things to start with and looking at. Looking at maybe if it's for sale, what's the cost? What are they asking for it? Is the acquisition price make sense for what you want to do? And can you afford it in your budget? Because the SRO we purchased in Cope on 97th Street, the original asking price for the building was $18 million from the developer loan. It's really a slumlord. I don't even know if it's a developer, whatever it is. But COVID hit, things went south for him. The city was on top of him. He was operating a legal hotel, and we ended up purchasing it for $11 million.
Wow.
So we were able to get a $7 million reduction just because the whole market collapsed on him, and he got forced out.
Yeah.
So that's a rare opportunity where you're able to get something like that. But that's what, as nonprofits, we have to look for those things because we can't compete. The for-profit developers have a lot more access to capital and money that's available. So they can jump, what they do is they can hold a property for a year by just putting down a deposit. Even if it's a contract, the contract may not what you call going hard, means that they still have their way out, but they've tied the property up. So they have the ability to put that money out for that period of time. We don't. As a nonprofit, I don't have huge access to large amounts of capital that can sit for a year while we decide whether we want to do a project or not and do the due diligence on the property. So they're able to tie up properties faster. And so that's a hard part for us although we've come up with some ways around that, and that we could talk another time about. We had some philanthropy come in and help create a way for us to have access to quick capital that we can use to put as down payments on properties if we want to try and make the property work. So we are more competitive with the for-profit market rates now. Yeah. Sir?
Then when a project is completed and ready to occupy, what's the ongoing sort of management structure that you create for it?
Here, we have two ways we do this. First way, we have an in-house property management division because we have a number of buildings. So we run, for certain buildings, we will run our own in-house management. So that means you're talking to the owner when you have a problem in your building. You're not talking to a third-party management company. Now, for one of our buildings, this one that was up on the screen, we are debating whether we're going to engage with a third-party management company or not. There's some complexities with it, and especially when you have a tax credit deal about how you market the units, how you qualify the individuals. There's a lot of things to get into the
Is
building.
it the Fortune Society that retains ownership, or do you create a separate LLC for each property?
Well, here's how it works. In New York, for us, they have a specialized corporation that's used for real estate development. It's called the Housing Development Fund Corporation. So that's how you hold title for it. It also gives you the exemption for the property taxes that we qualify for as a nonprofit. So in order for that HDFC to qualify us for the tax exemption, it needs to be 100% owned by the nonprofit. So we 100% own it. So if you looked up the HDFC in the computer database, it will say the Fortune Society 100% owner. So we use another vehicle but we are the 100% owner of the building.
And finally, is there a time period in which these financings sort of last, you know, for tax credits, whatever else? Is it 30 years?
Well, you have, for tax credit deal, it's 15 years, and then the tax credits technically are what they call used up at that point. And then you go into what's called year 15, refinancing. So what you look at that point is exiting the tax credit investor who bought the tax credits, essentially, and that they move out. It reverts then to 100% ownership of, let's say, Fortune Society through our entity. We will be the owner of it. Now, it's a little bit different for us. I'll give you an example of our Castle Gardens, which is in year 15 right now. It had tax credits, but it also had a loan from the state through what's called its HHAC program, its homeless housing initiative, and it also had a loan from the city. Now, these are what's called forgivable loans, essentially. The price you pay for the loan is that you agree to what's called a regulatory agreement. The regulatory agreement says with the state and the city that for the period of the loan, which is 30 years, that you cannot convert this building into market rate housing. It has to stay affordable within the regulation, within the terms of the agreement. So we know already that even though in year 15 on Castle Gardens that the tax credit investor is out, we're going to at least another 15 years of required affordability. Now, HPD, since these buildings after 15 years usually have large capital needs, we're going to probably refinance here, do a lot of corrections to the building. Buildings age, so you need capital to the infrastructure of the building. Things just have to get replaced. So we're going to probably refinance out and agree to an even longer extension on affordability to bring in that money to help refurbish the building after 15 years. Now, I will say this, I'd love for any of you to come up and see the building. You would not believe it's a 15-year-old building, the way we've kept it up. It is a good-looking building, and the inside, we really pride ourselves on maintaining the buildings at a high level, and so that the people who moved in at the beginning feel like the building is staying the same, that it's not deteriorating around them. And we put a lot of effort into that.
Yeah, 30 years is kind of a short time, really, but I just want to think about the possibility of sites that would be available, or buildings that might be available. For example, there's that enormous tower that's in bankruptcy in downtown Brooklyn. Why can't that be taken over and developed into this type of housing? There's a site on Bedford Avenue in Eastern Parkway, a huge site that has some bankruptcy issues that is near the Major Owens that we wish that, the Armory that we wish your type of organization had taken over from the very beginning and developed. So what can we do to have sites like that brought into this not-for-profit organization?
A lot of it's politics, folks. That's what it is.
And what can we do?
But the just so you know what we're up against, I'm being honest here. The real estate lobby, the developers in this city are extremely powerful people. They are. It's just what it is. So they have the ability and the resources to affect change in ways that us nonprofits, we can't do. So part of it's political, is there political will to take these things? And now I'll give you an example. The state, there was what's called Bayview, was a correctional facility in Chelsea, in Manhattan. That came available as a project. Our sister agency, the Osborne Association, is taking that correctional facility and converting it into affordable and supportive housing, which I find would be the greatest thing that happened, to take what used to be a prison and make it into housing for people who are formerly incarcerated. That, to me, was the greatest use of that property that you could do. But that's the state seeing that instead of giving that to market rate developers or to people, which is in Chelsea, a prime area, you know,
Right across the street from Chelsea Pier.
you couldn't be more prime space than that.
Right.
But that's the political will to put affordable and supportive housing there. And if that can be done, and we should be able to do it anywhere. If you can put it into Chelsea, one of the most expensive places in the country to live,
Yeah.
and you're putting it there, then we should be able to do this in other
What
places.
laws or bills, are there that can support this type of housing? Are there any type of laws?
Well, it's really, and this is the assemblyman, and this is the legislature. Legislature has a lot of control here about how we build things in this city. You have the city council, and we have some local control over things, but a lot of it comes from Albany. And if Albany is prioritizing this type of housing and saying, yes, this is what we want to do, and I know in the budget there was more money put in this year, that's huge.
So Farah and Brian for our area,
Yeah.
Farah and Sapone.
So, but I would say one thing about also, when you get at the state level, there's competing needs, the downstate, which is us, and the upstate. And, you know, I remember when we went for our first set of tax credits, we didn't get it the first round we went through because they only funded one downstate project, and it was mostly all upstate that got the money. And that, you know, there were a lot of worthy projects in this area that should have been funded on that round. I'm grateful in the second round we got through, we got it, and a number of other projects that didn't make it in that first round also got through. But that controls a lot, because building in New York City is very, very expensive. All of the bureaucracy you have to go through, you're talking millions of dollars before you put a shovel in the ground. The design requirements, the architects, the engineers, all of that costs money. So you have that before you even start construction. Then construction costs in the city, very expensive. Lots of parts to it in order to be able to successfully build something. So, you know, so access to that financing is another way to be able to do these projects, and having the ability to get to that. And Albany has a large say in that because they issue tax credits. It comes out of the state. And there are local tax credits for the city, but most of the development for this type of work that we do comes from the state. There's a lot of it's there. So if they're prioritizing it, then it'll happen. So.
In terms of advocacy, are there any nonprofit developer coalitions? And if there are, how active are they in terms of?
They are, and we have things. One is called CSH. It's a Center for Supportive Housing. They're here in the city. Corporations for Housing. Sorry, and they do a lot of that work. We are part of it. They're a big advocacy arm. They go to Albany all the time. They're pushing the city. Part of the other issue is the bureaucracy to build something and the amount of time and effort it takes. It really shouldn't take so long. There is a lot of streamlining that should be done at the city level in terms of getting permits, in terms of getting approvals. That shouldn't take as long as it takes. And there are other parts of the country where, you know, they have seen that, and they've reformed their construction processes to allow things to get from design to building faster. And
What would be an example of one?
just that you have to go to so many different parts of the city to get approval. I'll give you an example. On 97th Street, we ended up, because that building was in a landmark zone, but not only did we have to go to the city builds, but we had to go through the landmark commission to be able to get through that. That put an extra, like 8 to 10 months before we could even do anything. We had to go through that, and their review of you can't change anything on the facade of a building if you're in a landmark. If you do, like, we wanted to change like one iron door, literally on the front, that became a whole issue but these are the things, when you talk about housing development in the city of New York, that there are ways that they can make it more efficient and better for developers to be able to do it in a more timely way.
What's a city that's streamlined? You said other cities.
I worked with a group out in Denver, Colorado, about how they were developing similar type housing we have. They're great people, and we were talking about the amount it takes for us to do here, and they were talking about how they had partnership with their local government and the state government, and that they were able to get through the process significantly faster than we could do it here in New York. Because they were really, both of the state and the city wanted the development of this housing. So they worked with the developers and the nonprofit there to expedite the process. And I just think we could do a better job here in the city of doing that. I don't have to tell all of you that we all struggle with the bureaucracy of the city of New York in different ways every day. And it's, it's something we can do. But I will say this, the funding here in the city is supportive of this housing. And I used to live in Miami, Florida, and we did not have the same support for the city. The infrastructure of the cities didn't support the affordable housing in the way it's being done. It's supported here financially. We have our problems, but we do have a mission to do it. So, yeah.
I have a question. Is there any tenant screening process
Yes.
involved, and what is the criteria?
Well, now, if you have, depending on the type of housing, it is. If it's tax credit housing, you have to meet the qualifications for a tax credit building. And there's a whole bunch of steps you have to go through to apply. First, it's usually done by lottery, the building, you have a lottery. But even after the lottery, to be in the lottery, you have to qualify for the housing. And that's based on income for most of the time. Because you do want the deeply affordable units to go to people who really need it, and not to people who don't, who could afford more. So part of that is doing the income verification, all that process that you have to go through. I know it's tedious and it's painful, but that's what really makes sure that the units go to people who really need the units. So that's another whole, we could have hours of discussion about how that process works. I'm not the best expert at it. We have a lease-up specialist in our organization. She's gone through this in a number of buildings, and she can talk more about how the process works of assessing individuals and making sure that they should be getting those units. Now, we do affordable and supportive units. Supportive units are not by lottery. They're by individuals who qualify by the nature of, for us, they had criminal justice history, and also we do an assessment for readiness for permanent housing. Not everybody's ready for this type of housing. There's a lot to live in a community where there are expectations about rules how you live, expectations on how you live, and those things. So we are also assessing for that. We don't want someone to fail. We don't want someone to come into and not be able to be a part of it. So part of us is readiness for that type of housing.
And we don't want people coming in to change the makeup of the house, area as well.
Right.
So
And
the procedure has to graduate.
exactly, we use what's called a housing continuum for us. Two things we've done. We've created emergency transitional housing. That's for individuals who we believe should be with us a year to 18 months to stabilize and to get the services they need, get themselves organized and in order so that they can go on to a more permanent type of housing. But we also saw that funding for that has been drying up, unfortunately. It's not as much funding for that transitional housing as there used to be. But there was still funding for shelter money. So we didn't want to do this, but we decided that in the best effort for our building, we opened a shelter inside of one of our buildings as well. It's a 35-bed shelter. But we use it also as a form of transitional housing, that people are engaged in programming and services with the hope of getting them out of the shelter and either into our transitional housing or if they're ready, into our permanent housing. So that's our model. Not everybody is ready. We also carry 200 scatter site apartments in the 4 boroughs, not in Staten Island. Those are units that we've rented in buildings where people who are ready to live on their own with less supportive services are able to, we have subsidized housing for them. And they have, I believe don't count me on this, but 70% of the rent is covered, 30% is from the individual in that type of supportive housing. So that's, scattered site came about because there was a lack of permanent affordable supportive housing out there in buildings that just didn't exist. So that's, the alternative came was this scattered site type program. So those are the different types of housing we do. We try to meet people where they are and put them into housing that is most appropriate and best for them to be successful. But the real goal for us is getting people off the street and making sure they're not there anymore. And that they are given safe housing, that they have access to food, nutrition, that they have, and access to services that they need. So that's what we do. That's how we do it.
The in-house property management, is that created to create like an income stream for the nonprofit?
Actually, we make no money on that. That is a loss leader, because there is no, because it's in the cost of operations to do it. So if we hired someone out, it would have to come out of our budget. So if you hire a third party, when you're budgeting for the building, you would have to budget that cost to the third party. When we do it in-house, what it allows us to do is, it's not really a profit stream, but it allows us to enhance services for the building. Because where our money is repurposed into more services provided for our participants. So we have a little bit of a different model. We never have I will tell you, we never have a profit. That is not, the day that happens.
But I didn't mean profit, I mean just like income
Yeah,
to keep the.
exactly. Well, you know, our goal is that at the end of the day, that our buildings don't cost us money. Meaning that we are able to, that the income that we're able to generate in the building covers the cost of the building. And that's the goal. And we can have another discussion about the financing models that support that. There are different ones. There are some new ones out with the city that are much better, and we're developing what's called the Master Lease Program with Department of Homeless Services, which is really putting a robust funding source behind our building. We're going to be able to do a lot with that, and it's a 40-year contract with the city, and it is really it covers the debt service on the building. It gives seriously enough money to operate the building and to provide services to the, we are really grateful to DHS that they came up with this. It's been very difficult to get to closing, and we were one of the first ones to go through this. But if you look at what it's going to do, it's going to be able to repurpose buildings and bring them on quicker in 16 to 18 months, because you can do a rehabilitation and take buildings that really, you know, we could repurpose them. And
does that model have any perspective to take from private landlords who are hoarding apartments? Because I think that's a huge issue in this community. Old ladies die in my building and no one ever moves in, it never gets renovated, and it's just empty, and it could be housing for someone or some family, because they're usually 3 bedrooms or more.
exactly. It's the rent stabilization that gets you on that.
Right.
And that's the whole, and then you have the families who inherit the bill I'm not an expert on rent stabilization, far from it, but I know those rules come into play about these units and the turnover and.
Well, I think I'm asking, is advocacy groups for nonprofits or anything doing anything to advocate for?
I'm not seeing that, but that is definitely an interesting issue, because that is housing stock that's not being used. And we should be making use of everything that's available.
And what you're saying, to rehab a building is cheaper and quicker than building from
Of
the
course it
ground
is.
up,
Yeah.
right? So.
Yeah, it is much faster. And, well, let's put it this way, if the building's in really bad condition, it's not that much faster, but if it's decent, then yes. And, you know, but there's a lot of different ways to approach this. And I'm interested to see if this master lease program catches on, because I know it's being used out at the JFK airport. They took a large hotel and converted it. They're in the process of converting it now. I know the developers for that. And we're gonna see if this works, because if it works, I think it's a quicker way to get housing stock available.
So why?
Excuse me, so sorry. In the back, she's been trying to
Yeah,
raise
go
her
ahead,
hand.
there you go.
Thank you
There
so much.
I can't see
And
that.
that's the one with DHS, the master.
Yes.
Okay, so first I wanna start off with, I agree with, what one of the people said, how 30 years is still pretty short. And I'm gonna give an example, through HPD, within the DHS system, I have a referral for Flatbush Gardens, I don't know if
Right.
you're familiar with them.
No.
But they have over like 52 buildings, they're considered one of the like highest private developments in Brooklyn, so since they have over 2,500 units, and they have a $191 million tax cut with the city
Oh, yeah?
for 40 years just to offer 250 of those, which is 10% to homeless populations, which is how I got the call. But I'm using this example to further explain, like even when you were mentioning turning into shelters, the funding is available, when it's rehabilitation or transitional housing, funding dries up here and there. It's like a perpetuating cycle of so-called benefits or incentives, and then when it's no longer available, we still have the same issues. So a lot of questions have been raised with advocacy and nonprofits, and even in the community board, we're told we have a voice, but a lot of times it's only the community board members. And I can relate to, you probably had the hard time with getting the formerly incarcerated people to housing, because the last board meeting, people were debating over if people had the right to access an accessible bathroom that was for free. You know, people didn't feel like that was the right for people. So being that, like you said, honestly, transparently, this is the way it's set up with real estate development, et cetera, but we don't have the power on the community end. On the community board end, like you acknowledge, a lot of times it's when it's already set in stone and done, the funding's been allocated, or the developer, like you said, whether you're a nonprofit or not, you're the one that has to develop it at the end of the day, and it's costly for you. So even when you have an incentive, you still have to look at market rate, because even the law, like you just informed, doesn't allow you to do fully supported. So to me, I'm still seeing it a government issue, and I know you said a lot of it is legislative. I'm not suggesting that it's on your responsibility, but what is the look into lobbyists and actual legislative as a group, legislative change and development and bills, because the affordable housing crisis crisis, you beat me to it when you said gentrification, but it didn't just occur today. It's a governmental streamlining process within the governmental framework. Like that was one of the questions I was asking, how are y'all combating that, even with the market rate properties, because you still have to have the market rate, and that's majority market rate, and it is supported. So there's still not gonna be an affordable development at the end of the day, because it's gonna help to pipeline that education. So my first question I asked is there lobbying, or what is the larger framework to get that legislation done to where they're honoring and looking into those loopholes? So just like with the landmarking, I'm sure it was an intentional protection for the landmarks, but a lot of the landmarks are governmental. When we wanna get little landmarks for a historic building for us, we still have to go through the same red tape. So even that, they're protecting their interests, so they make it in a way to where even if you did have the community interest at heart, they make it difficult for you now just for a simple door. So what is more widespread, the actual planning on that? I need to know the plan, because even you mentioning somebody's apartment that is one homeowner, there's enough 4 bedrooms can house a one homeless person. That's how much vacant properties there are in New York City. And then my second question is, how have you saw in your experience that it can actually be feasibly done, and the work that has actually been done towards that? Because a lot of times, like you're here yourself, you're representing a nonprofit. The for-profit entity, they're gonna come after the fact that they have the money and the capital to do so. So they're not concerned with these talks. So as somebody who's directly impacted, like even the shelters, when they say it's supportive, this and that, it's none of that shit. Because you still gotta go through, you still gotta go through DHS and HPD and HC, Housing Corporation, like HCD. You gotta go through all the DDDs, federal, state, and then they come up with more red tape. Oh, your income isn't right, they gotta give you amended income. Like these are people actually going through them. I'm speaking from experience. And then the shelter system is atrocious. It's atrocious, you know? And there's no change with that. That's why they have more funding for that. They'll rather build shelters than give you permanent housing.
Yeah.
Amen. I almost don't even know, I can tell you this, you know, a small nonprofit, well, relatively, we, in the world of housing development, you know, we're not a big giant. But we fight the advocacy fight every day. We have an advocacy wing of our organization. They take up these things all the time. The Fair Housing Act that was passed by the city was in large part due to our efforts. We spearheaded that you cannot take into account a person's criminal justice history when they apply for housing up front. What we found was that there was blanket discrimination in the city. Many landlords, if you had a criminal justice history, they were just not gonna rent to you. And that's discrimination. And we sued 2 large landlords in the city and won. And they redid their whole process of having people admitted to their buildings because of that. We took them to federal court and they lost. Because it was just discrimination, that's all it was. So you have these structural barriers that exist, okay? The discriminatory actions of landlords. You add that on top of all you talked about, all those things. It is a mountain to climb. And I wish I could sit here and tell you I had answers for all of this. But I will tell you what we believe. One, we opened our own shelter because the shelters are atrocious. So at least we're able to take 35 people out of bad shelters and have them in a good place to live every day. And we're proud of our shelter. And we were actually even honored by DHS as one of the top shelter providers in the city. So we know what we're doing. There's 2 things I've come to realize. One, we're probably not gonna build our way out of this problem. And I wish I could. And I wish there was enough that we could build enough buildings to create the housing for everyone. But I've come to the realization that's not happening.
Well, there's plenty of housing.
There is, but as this lovely young woman said it back there, this is exactly the problem. There are so many barriers to it. And until the barriers are brought down, and you know, I know the city of Yes is kind of a start to it, but it's not the answer to it. There are so many barriers, so many things. We underutilize our housing stock. There are empty apartments. There are buildings that could be used. All these things are answers that are right in our communities now. But what we've talked about, a number of the things that stop it. You have certain communities that don't want affordable and supportive housing anymore. So they're fighting tooth and nail to keep you out. And they make it very, very difficult to go build there and to bring it there.
It's just greed and real estate lobbying and holding and keeping the rents up. It's nothing more than greed right now.
Yeah, and it's property value. It's perceived, this perception that if you bring in this type of housing, somehow your property values are gonna drop. And they don't. I can show you that. In the area we're in West Harlem right now, they're doing just fine for property owners right next to us.
But then your taxes go up. So who wants their property value to go up when your taxes go up?
Well, but the people who argue, there are people who argue that bringing in this type of housing depresses property values, and that property value is what they perceive, like, what they are, if you hear the argument, that the value of that house, or whatever it is what they're sending on to the next generation, when they're, and that they don't want to see it drop, or that's their nest egg for retirement, so when they sell it, that they'll be able to cash out.
Well, and also some districts like Vital Brooklyn is creating a conglomerate of one type of housing in one area, and that's not fair either, right?
Look, you need diversity of housing. You need, we could have a large discussion about the housing ailments of the city and what we can do about it. For me, sometimes I wake up, that's overwhelming to me. I kind of like think about it and go, it's hard to get out of bed at that moment when you think about all those things. But what I think about for us, and I know the leadership of our organization thinks about it, is that we're gonna do our part. No matter what we can do, we're gonna do what we can do. Whether it's advocating in Albany or in City Hall to try and get things better, whether it's taking on housing programs for our people and for the community, that's what we do. And we're committed to it. I hope and I pray that other organizations feel that they can do it. I try and give technical assistance to other nonprofits to show them the way that it can be done, and done in a way that you're not gonna be at a risk that, you know, smaller nonprofits concerned about the risk of doing these types of ventures. So I try and show them the ways you can mitigate that risk. And I spend a lot of time talking to other agencies to do this. We need everybody to join in on this. It's not gonna be just us doing it. We need partners in this. But I will tell you, we're here to do it, and we're not going anywhere. We've been around 57 years. We expect to be here 57 more doing this. And that's our mission. We wake up every day doing it at the Fortune Society. And that's it.
I have a nonprofit organization that's creating the Crown Heights Community Land Trust. I would love to be able to talk and work with you and see how you can
Any
tool our
help you,
organization to help us.
and it's my pleasure. When I've helped groups in Harlem that, I'll give you an example, there was a smaller nonprofit that was in the process of doing a project. And they came to me and they were doing a joint venture with a developer. And they were saying, we're not sure, we think we're being taken advantage of. They sent me their documents and they were being taken advantage of. They were not getting the percentage of participation they should have gotten in that deal. So I explained to them and their lawyer what they needed to do to renegotiate this deal. And it ended up, because the developer wanted to do the deal, they got a better participation in that project. And it is, we've seen this before, and many times developers feel they can strong arm nonprofits. They want them in the deal, but they don't want to pay them what they should be paying for their participation in this. And part of the reason we develop our own projects now is because we don't want to be in that situation. But there aren't that many nonprofits that can afford right now. We have almost $120 million of loans out there and financing that we're responsible for in these projects, that their balance sheets can handle this, and that they can, and that they feel comfortable assuming that risk. Because real estate's a risky deal. I don't care what the city and everybody else, there is inherent risk in doing it, and it takes a lot to do it.
Is the Fortune Society in California?
No, we're here, we're in the 5 boroughs, and what we do is technical assistance for other agencies outside of the city of New York. So we've done help work with organizations in Colorado, Louisiana, California, but it's just been, we have a narrow focus. We are a New York-centric organization. It's just the way we are. We've had the opportunity to go to other cities, but really, it takes a lot, and what we feel is the better model for us is to support organizations that are there already, on the ground, and help them to be better, and to see if we can partner with them in the process. So we've worked with organizations in California. I'm part of a group that we created a toolkit for doing this type of housing development with the organizations out in California as well. And they're very progressive out there in that way.
Is there still access to that toolkit?
Yeah, man.
If you want to send me everything,
I'll send you everything.
I doubt no
Get
everyone
everything
is.
emailed.
Yeah. So what brought you to our district, our specific areas? Or site you've identified, or you invited?
Jolie.
Oh.
We were at an event. My wife is a dean at Columbia University, one of the undergraduate schools, and Jolie was at an event we were at, and I was just talking about what I do, because sometimes people just ask me, I'm just like, I'll start talking about housing development, and she said, we have to talk.
We need you.
Exactly.
We need
And she asked if I would
affordable
come. It's my pleasure. This is the greatest joy of what I do is doing this, is reaching out and talking to people in the community. I love this. I would do this every day if I could do this. My boss would not be that happy, but he would be paying attention to what I'm paid to do. But this is, for me, when I'm done and I hang up everything and I'm finished, to have communities have strong, good housing and know that I had some small part in that is, for me, what I want to do for the remainder of my career. And I'm hoping that I get that chance. And meeting folks like you and coming out here is and to see that you're interested in this makes me feel a lot better about being here in New York too.
I just want to say thank you, because my nephew was in there for a while, and he came out, he was in a halfway house, but he finally
coming home and having people help you and open their arms to you instead of closing their arms to you. That's the way we do it. We open our arms to people who come home, and we're there. And I will tell you this, it's not always successful, unfortunately. Some people, it doesn't work. What we tell people is this: we're here forever for you. So if you're not ready now and it didn't work, come back to us in 3 years. Come back to us in 2 years if it's not. And we'll still be here for you. And it's not a straight line. Recovery, we know this in substance use, we know with mental health, that it's never a straight line. And but you have to stay there and be open to people, and when they're ready, and be there for them when they are ready. And this has been the greatest job of my life that I've had. And when we open a building and I see people literally crying because they got apartments that will change their lives for generations to come, there's nothing more powerful than that. And for me, that's why I wake up in the morning and do this, because there's no greater thing. And I appreciate every one of you that you're interested in it and that we do it. And I hope hope we get the chance to come to your community one day and do it, because I think you would really enjoy working with us.
We would welcome you with open arms, I think.
Because I think you
If we
would
could
see
find a
that.
place.
We gotta find something.
We start looking, that's what I'm hearing.
Near a subway stop.
Yes.
So for one, the Crown Heights Community Land Trust meets here,
Yeah.
the last Friday of every month. So we just had our first meeting, last week. Next one, April.
Let me know,
Yep.
send me an email, and if I'm able to, I will be here.
Is there any last questions? We're at like 5 minutes left before we close. Who wants to finish us up?
It's not a huge question, but I'm actually working with CB11 right now to identify sites and buildings for redevelopment / rehab, to remake the case to HPD for more affordable housing. So definitely love to kind of like pick your brain.
Anytime,
get some
Tom.
feedback on what I have.
I would love to talk to you about that. And, yeah,
Does your building have security?
yes, 24 hours.
24 security.
But we don't, it's not security guards. We use residential aides. We don't, in our buildings, I will tell you 2 things. We do not x-ray, we do not wand, and we don't have security guards. And we have very low incidents. Because there's a cohesion in our buildings about how the people live, and we don't need it.
You're showing them that they should be appreciative and don't mess up where you mess.
Exactly. And if you don't, you have. Exactly. And then, and it's also the unique mixture, especially in our permanent supportable buildings, that you have individuals who have criminal justice and don't. But they have formed themselves into a community, that a caring community that cares about its building and is proud of it. And that when you have that in a building, you don't need anything else. We don't have to have security guards. We don't have to have X-ray machines, wanding. And I remember the city, when we opened our shelter, we told them, our non-negotiable is no X-ray machine, no wanding, no security guards. You want us to be a part of the DHS program? That's our, we're not doing it. But it explains, we don't have it in our shelter. And our shelter just got awarded the highest level award you get for DHS as a shelter.
Nice. That's why I asked about your criteria of the tent, because that's important.
But if you ask us though, when we go into the shelter system, we're seeking people with criminal justice involvement. Other shelter providers are the ones running from that population. So we're able to do it with people who are perceived to be the most risky, and they're not.
But you're also providing them with service.
Of course we are.
Resources.
And that's what
Like, that's part of the issue though.
And
Like,
that-
you
but
can't
that's-
just take someone out.
We're not just putting someone in.
Well, by a nonprofit.
But we have. Is that,
By a
that's the
nonprofit that
difference.
actually cares about the.
See, that's the difference. We measure ourselves. Okay? And we have outcomes, we have measurables, we know what we do. It's not, and we hold ourselves to it.
It's pure lead.
It's pure lead. Over 50% of our staff are criminal justice involved. We hire our mission, so that's not even a question. So it's a different, it's our secret sauce, I'll tell you. It works.
Is David Rothenberg still?
Yes, he is. He's my favorite. I started as a volunteer, for Dave. I used to type his letters for him. That's what I did when I came to Fortune, not knowing what I was going to do 9 years ago. And he's still going strong. Guys, he has the fountain of youth. It's in him. But this is, he is the legacy. We are his legacy.
He dresses well too.
Oh, yeah, every day. He is I hope at 91 I'm like that.
One other question, I just have one other question. Since you guys do development, how do you, hire GCs and?
Well, like everybody else, we have a bidding process.
Okay.
We put out to the GCs who are in this space. For the new build project, 6 GCs submitted bids, and we have the criteria we go through in the bidding process, and we look at, and we made a choice on it. And I will say this time, we made a really good choice.
We're the one that says that.
It's called Bronx Pro. They're up from the Bronx, and they were on time and on budget. So,
But how does someone get access to RFPs?
for us, if it depends if you're licensed and you have all the criteria, then give me your name and information. I'll put you in the next round.
All right, sounds good.
Because we want to diversify. And,
Yeah. I work for NWE.
NWB requirements, we work with that all the time, so, yes. And our architect is MWB.
Yeah.
So, and our lawyer is MWB.
Yeah.
So we are very much, we're very big on diversifying who we work with on our teams.
I don't have a call, but if I can give you.
I got one left. I'll give it.
All right, and we're gonna transition. One last question right there. I've been seeing your hand, please.
So I want to speak to one of your points when you have said, like, you try to help other nonprofits. So realistically, is there any type of way that they can combat the for-profit sector? As you know, that capital is a very high, very big limit that keeps that process. So that's, if it is, in what way? And then lastly, when you talk about, sometimes how you want to wake up, I don't want to be stuck,
No, and I don't want to be
And
stuck.
for me, it's not even about playing my part. I am the whole pie that's getting eaten. I'm not even getting the opportunity. I'm just being paid on. So what is a real advocacy point? Because I know deep in my age, it's 20%, 40%. The community board developed for this community board said, they advocate for 30% or 40%. I'm thinking 100% of 100% or whatever, however it could go to really get that our population. So, but what's a realistic point to where we can start to, as a whole, get what we really need? And I know building us out of that is not necessarily.
Part of it is this, and I would say it's your elected officials. I gotta be honest with you. Because they've created this system where we are. Change is only gonna come when we put people on the city council or people who are really ready to make deeply affordable housing. They've gotta say it, and they have to advocate for it. We advocate all we want, and we go to Albany all the time, we talk to the assemblyman, we talk to all the different people who are involved in this process. So, all I can say is, a lot of this is political, and it has to be political will to do it. And if there is political will to do it, it'll happen. So, I wish I had the answer to your questions, I'm sorry.
And that takes voting, because, they look at certain communities, and if, there's 5,000 residents in a community and only 200 vote, they're not gonna listen to those 200 people. It has to be 4,999 people voting.
No, listen.
Action with the elected
Yeah.
officials.
But then there's still that 20,000% that is not that community. So either way, you're gonna be.
Well, I'm talking about in your councilmanic district, in your assembly district, right? In this
It's
voting
still gonna
block.
have that wider population. We say that all the time. We are 13% in this country. In this city, that is even lower.
Yeah, so I think that concludes our event today, everybody.
Thank you
you guys so much.
I agree.
Thank you, Mr. Nash. That was wonderful.
Thank you for having me. This has been a privilege.
That was amazing.
I wonder what Crystal had to say with regards to the developer and everybody.